Which one, which diagram was that? This one? Yeah, there's the diagram, I think. Yeah. Are you with me? Okay, what's wrong with process 4?
Process 4 was using resource 2.
It has one instance of resource 2. Remember, if this was a printer, we have 2 printers. One of them is held by process 4, and the other one now is held by process 1. So process 4 doesn't need nothing else. We could have started with process 4, terminated it, and released the printer. And then we'd have given the printer to this one, because this one is pointing at the printer, says, I need that. Okay, so any process, if it points at a resource, that means it's requesting that resource. So process 3 is requesting this. But which one is this allocated to? It's allocated to process 4. It needs nothing else. That means just a matter of time before it finishes. We jump in the future to that point of time. We say process 4 finished. It will release or relinquish this. Now this is free. We can give it to this one because this one is requesting it. Reverse the arrow and we say now this is allocated to process 3. And now process 3 can finish. We could have done this way. This is another release sequence. However, he was telling us earlier on, he started with process 2, then process 1, process 3, 4. Now we could have started with process 4, process 3, process 1 and 2, or 2 and 1. So there are multiple sequences. But in your exam, and when you write it, it's your logic, your explanation that will determine the sequence. It can be perfect. Any sequence can be okay, gets full results. As long as you get to a sequence maybe that says there's no deadlock. Unless if there is a deadlock. Maybe you say there is a deadlock, we know we can get out of the deadlock. Then your answer wouldn't be right. Right, do you want to have a go at this? Yeah, you who asked the question. Are you still with me? Is there a deadlock here? Or if there is, tell me what's the deadlock sequence. And if everything is released, tell me what's the release sequence. Go on. What do you start with? Which one would you start with? A good idea, start with one that has everything it needs. Look, is there any process that has everything? No, there's no process that has everything. Right, okay, go through them in one at a time. Start with number 1. Pardon? Yeah? Well, it cannot happen. It's already allocated to another process. So process 2, it needs 3 resources. It needs resource 1, it has it. No, it's pointing at it, says I want that. Sorry. Wait a minute, we're talking, sorry. Process 2 is pointing at resource 3, but it's already allocated this resource, and it's allocated this resource. All it needs is resource 3. Can it have it? No. No, it's already allocated to process 3. Process 3 needs 2 resources. It has 1, but it needs that one. Can it have that one? No. So none of them can finish. So there is a deadlock. Now you need to tell me what is the deadlock? Which processes are locked together? So you have to start at some point, at some process, and follow the arrows until you come back to the same process. And that will be the sequence, the deadlock sequence. So start at P1 and follow it and tell me what sequence will bring you back to P1. P1, R1, you need to follow the arrow. P2, yeah, you can't go in this direction, you have to follow the arrow. R3, P3, R2, P1. That's the deadlock sequence. As long as it brings you to the same point. Now, there may be a second deadlock. There might be 2 groups or 2 deadlocks in a group or multiple groups. Can you see another deadlock? A different sequence to the one you just mentioned. Yeah, look at this one. Starting, say, from process 2. We go process 2, resource 3, process 3, resource 2, process 2. This circle. This is a deadlock as well. So we have this deadlock, and we have this deadlock. We have two deadlocks in this. It's very difficult to break this. What about this one? Who's going to work on this? Anybody at the end there in the back? Anybody with us? No? Will I pick or will I see hands going up? Anybody wants to talk to us? I'll go back. Any of you guys want to tell me if there is a deadlock here or not? Anybody want to take the toes out? Yeah, you want to try? Go on. Is there a deadlock in here? Well, you have to start trying to get rid of the links. How can you start? You start with the process that has everything it needs. Is there a process there? Number 3, it only needs one resource and it's already allocated to it. So what happens? Now hold on, let's stick to process 3. It only needs a printer and it has the printer. So what's going to happen to it? It will finish. In the future it will finish. So let's jump to the future and say it's finished now. Right? And what happens when it finishes? It will release this resource. Is there anybody waiting on this resource? Process 1 wants a resource. Remember, we have 2 printers. They are identical. One of them is held by this one, but the other one now has become free. And process 1 is pointing at it, saying, can I have that? Requesting that. So that's your next step. You say this resource 2, this instant resource 2 is now allocated to process 1. So the arrow is reversed, we are pointing. What happens next? Then you look at process 1 now. We just gave it a resource. Can it finish? Yeah. Why? Why would the process finish?
It has all the resources it needs.
Exactly, because it has all the resources. We just gave it this resource and it needs that resource, it already has it. What happens when a process has all the resources it needs? It will finish. And what happens when it finishes?
Release the resources.
Release all the resources. So to release this one, nobody wants it anymore, because that one is finished, that one is finished. And to release that one, anybody wants the resource 1? Process 2, yeah, keep talking, I can't hear you. So process 2 needs that resource. You need to say, resource 1 is now allocated to process 2. That's done by the operating system. Say, let's give that resource to process 2. Now process 2 has everything. It has this one, and we give it this one. It has everything, and it will finish, and it will release, and all processes are finished. So, and therefore there is no deadlock. And what was the release sequence he used this time? Which one finished first? Process 3. He just told me, first thing, let's start with process 3, and then process 1, and then process 2. That's the release sequence. Okay? You need to state that. Which process finished first until we got them all finishing? Okay? This is really designed for you. Have a go at this. Are you okay? If you want to have a go at that, we'll let him continue. Now we'll let him continue. Be nice to you. You can have the go. Go on. Process 5 has everything it needs. Guys, this is the kind of answer you're expected to give. And then they're marked for every statement, for example. If there are 5 or 6 marks or 10 marks for this, in the right sequence, in the correct sequence. Go on. So, process 5 has everything it needs. You need to have 2 or 3 statements for a process. If it has everything it needs, what happens to it?
It terminates.
It will terminate. And after terminating, what happens to the resources? It will release that resource.
Yeah, and then process 3 will have the resource that process 5 is freed up and also terminate.
Okay, so you need to say resource 5 is allocated to process 3, and it has everything it needs, and therefore it will terminate.
Terminates, and then resource 3 will be
It will release this resource and that resource.
Yeah, and then process everything just kind of dominoes into being free.
Yeah, you're right, domino effect, and you get to 0. Go through them one at a time in an exam. Yeah, perfect, okay. So this resource is allocated to process 2. Process 2 has everything it needs. it will terminate and will release those two resources. This resource is needed by process 1, it's allocated to process 1. Process 1 has everything it needs. It will terminate and release resource 1 and 2. Okay. This one here could have finished. Actually, this one needs this resource, it has it. It has this resource could have been given to it right at the first instance. We could have started with process 4, and we could have started with process 5. It could, but process 5 only needs one resource, it has it, it's good, get rid of it. But this one, it needs 3 resources, it has 2 already, and it needs another one. We have 2 free entities. We can give it any one, and we terminate it. Yeah, it looks good. Okay, so it's reasonably simple, right? And I think we went through it. And that's what question 5 is for. If you cannot release all the links, then try to find a sequence of deadlock that brings you to the same point. And that will be a deadlock sequence. If there are 2 sequences, try to find them as well. All right, I think we'll... Who wants to take this one? Okay, you have this one. Is there a deadlock?
Me?
Please.
Yes, there's a deadlock, for example, P2, R2, P3, and R3.
Say again?
P2, R2, P3, and R3. There is a cycle and force.
Are you sure? Yeah. Okay.
P2, R2, P3.
Yeah, we'll get rid of any processes first that we can get rid of.
Sorry?
Get rid of any processes. Can we terminate any process?
One, of course, and...
Yeah, process 1 has everything it needs.
Yeah.
It will finish, it will release this resource. So that's process 1 is gone. So now we have process 2 and 3. Can they finish? This one needs 3 resources. Those 2 when it has them, it needs that one, it cannot have it. It's already with process 3. Process 3 needs 2 resources. It has 1 and it needs that one. Can it have it?
No, I mean, P3 needs resource 3 and use cycle.
So there's a deadlock. Is that what you're saying? Do you agree with him? Paulina, do you agree with him? He said there is a deadlock here. Are you with us or are you doing something else? And we can go to another student. Is there a deadlock in here? Can you follow it up? Paulina, are you stuck for words, are you? Let's start. Start with process 1. Can it finish? This process, can it finish? Yes. Because why? Because it has all the resources it needs. Right? So it will finish. So you need to say that. It will finish. And then what happens when it finishes? Yeah, so when it finishes, it has to release this resource 3.
Then the program and process number 3 can also terminate because it has...
So process number 3, how can it terminate? It needs 2 resources. It has number 2. It needs number 3.
Yes, there's a deadlock. There's no deadlock because while process 1 releases T.
Yeah, so because this one is released, that one is free. We can give it to this process.
Yeah.
Okay, and when this process gets those 2 resources, it will finish because it will have everything it needs, and it will release this resource, and it will release that resource. And now that resource number 2 can be given to process 2 and to finish.
Sorry.
So there's no deadlock. It's okay to be sorry. Don't be sorry now, but in the exam, make sure you go through it in a cool kind of manner to make sure. Because if you say there is a deadlock and there isn't, that's it. That's the end. 0. Right, this one? You want to have a go at this? Yeah. What do you think? Start with a process that has everything it needs. Probably none of them. This one, does this have everything?
No,
It doesn't. It needs 4, it only has 1.
but it doesn't mean that it needs.
It needs 2 instances of resource 2. It needs 2 printers.
Okay.
We have 3 of printers, but it only needs 2. But it has one, actually needs 3 of them. It has one, it needs the other 2. The other 2 are busy with other resources. So that one cannot finish, P3.
Yeah, and then P2 can be finished because it has resource 1, resource 2,
It needs this resource.
and also can pick up the fields that
How, what do you mean pick up? I don't understand the word pick up. Allocate or request?
request
It's requesting resource 3.
and there's a field whose instance
Say,
we can delete the resources.
no, hold on. I just want to hear the next statement from you. Process 2 needs resource 3. What happens next?
Yeah, we can allocate one instance.
That's what you need, yeah. We allocate resource, one instance of resource 3 to process 2. What happens to process 2? It can finish. It will finish. And then what happens when it finishes? It will, what happens to the resources it was holding? It's holding now resource 3 and resource 2. When it finishes, what happens? That's the word I'm looking for. Release these 2 resources. Okay, so that resource became free. This one. Who wants it? Process 3 wants it and process 0 wants it. Which one would you give it to?
To process 0,
Why not process 3?
because I need another one.
Yeah, because it will have it and stay asleep. There's no point of giving it something that does. But with this process 1, if we give this to process 1 and process 1 needs one of those, it will finish. Okay, good. So, all right, that's what you should be saying. Resource 2 is allocated to process 0. Resource 3 is also allocated to process 0. And then what happens to process 0?
Process 0.
This one.
It's released.
It will finish and it will release. What will it release? You need to name them.
And the process
Resource 3,
resource 3 and 1 of
resource 2 and resource 1. And then resource 1, who wants it? Process 1 wants it.
yeah, process 1. And here there's also a free instance, so we can finish this.
So when process 1 gets that resource, it will finish, it will release that resource and that resource and also this resource. But now we can give it to process 3 and everybody finishes and there's no deadlock. Okay, so I'm looking for one that has a deadlock. I don't know if this one has a deadlock. Can you go through it and tell us if there is a deadlock? Can you go through this? Guys, you want to have a go? See. Can you see the numbers? I'll read them for you. Process 1, process 2, process 3, process 4. So can process 1 finish? No, because it needs 3 things. It only has the top one, but doesn't have process 2. Can finish? Yeah, why would it finish?
Can't.
Why not?
Because resource has resource above.
The top and the bottom, let's assume these resources are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It has resource 3 and it has resource 1.
Yes, it can finish.
So it will finish.
Yeah.
So when it finishes, it will release this and will release that. So that's done. So you need to notice which process finished first. And right here the sequence. P2 finished first. Then think of the resources that are released. That one is released. Who wants it? Give it to that process. If only one process wants it. And that one is finished.
Yes.
This one needs it.
Process 3 sure will finish.
Process 3 will finish.
Yes.
Why? It can now have that link. It already has this one, but it cannot have that.
It cannot finish because process 4 needs. So
Okay, process 4 will finish first.
yeah, process 4 and after process.
So process 4 will finish because it has all the resources it needs. So that can be the first one or this one. 2 and 4 will finish on their own. They already has everything. 2, then 4, and then 3, that one can be given to 3, and also that one that's released can be given to 3 finishes, and then finally number 1 will get this one with number 3 finishes. Okay, but you need to go through them one at a time in sequence, all right? If you don't write it down, if you say process 3 finishes, why? You need to tell me because it has all the resources it needs. Because I look at it, it doesn't. It needs those 2 resources. You have to sequentially reach the point where you say, I'm giving this resource to that process. And then it has everything it needs. Okay, I'm going to leave this. I don't know if there's a deadlock somewhere. You'll have to find out. So go through the lecture notes and practice this. It's a definite exam question. Now, I'm not saying it's a definite class test, but in the final exam, you're going to get one of these diagrams, and you need to decide is there a deadlock or not. And if there is not, then what is the release sequence? There's a mark for the release sequence, or if there is a deadlock, give me the deadlock sequence. All right, recovery from a deadlock. So we talked about how a deadlock happens. Anybody tells me how does a deadlock happen? What's needed for a deadlock to take place? Anybody remembers? Yeah?
The 4 conditions have to match simultaneously.
There are 4 conditions. If they exist in any system, there will be a deadlock. Can you name one of the conditions? Mutual exclusion. Resource holding. Circular weight. What's the non-preemptive? Hold on, non-preemptive. What's non-preemption mean? What does non-preemption condition mean in this instance, in the deadlock? Any idea? Non-preemptive. Not just interrupt, they're already interrupted, they're already asleep.
Resources cannot be taken.
And we cannot take a resource away from a process. Okay, so non-preemption, if you're asked what does the condition non-preemption mean? It means a process cannot be interrupted and a resource taken away from it, unless it gives it up voluntarily. Okay, that's non-preemption. Aisha, are you with me or are you doing something else out there? Yeah. Okay. All right, tell me, what are the 4 conditions for a deadlock? Aisha, you go back. Okay. Not preemptive. Hold and wait. Circular weight. Right. What's hold and wait? Thank you. What does the condition hold and wait mean? I'm just repeating these questions, guys, but I want you to know them. These are the kind of questions you'll be getting in an exam. Was somebody trying to answer hold and wait? What does hold and wait condition mean?
That a resource,
No, a process.
or a process, can wait for another
Resource?
while holding not where you want.
A process can enter into a waiting state for a resource while it's holding another resource. So if you can have a resource and wait for another one, that's called what's called hold and wait. If that's allowed in our system, then you're getting closer to a deadlock. What is meant by spooling? 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 Spooling. What's his name? Kelvin. Kelvin. Okay. What's spooling? Anybody knows what spooling is? Spooling? Guys, are you doing any studying at all? Did we mention spooling, did we?
I didn't go to school.
What does spooling stand for? The term spooling. Simultaneous. Peripheral or printing online. That means a printer, you have one printer, but all the processes, instead of using it one at a time, they all print simultaneously. or it appears to be simultaneous, as if it's happening simultaneously. What's a dedicated device? What's a mutual exclusive device?
The device can be used by one user at a time.
Very good. It's a device that can only be used by one user at any time. And when the user finishes, another user can use. Don't just say used by one user only. That's wrong. Used only by one user at a time. And when they finish, another user. But at any time, there's only one user using that device. Like a printer. A printer is a good example of a dedicated device. Or mutually exclusive device. Mutually exclusive device, same meaning as dedicated device. If you're asked what's a dedicated device, you can say it's a mutually exclusive device. That means it can only be used by one user at a time. When they finish, another user can use that. And what's a shareable device?
Shareable device.
Yeah?
Multiple users.
A number of users can use it, right? No. What's a shareable device?
A device that can be used by many processes at the same time.
At the same time. That's what you're missing. At the same time. So be careful. That word will cost you 5 marks in an exam. So a shareable device, a device that many users can use at the same time. So a printer also can be used by many users. If you just say a shareable device can be used by many users, that means a printer is a shareable device, which is not. Yeah, a printer can be used by not many users, but not at the same time. The word simultaneously, or at the same time, that's really important in those definitions. Now, what's a virtual device? A virtual device? Okay, it's a device that by its nature is a dedicated device, but we manage to use it as if, not really, but in reality, but as if it was shareable. Like a printer. A printer can never be shared, but we can somehow manage to make it appear like it's shareable, but we don't call it a shareable, we call it virtual. So when you hear the word virtual, shareable, that means it's almost, but it's not really like a shareable device. Almost. That's the word virtual. When you hear virtual reality, it's very close to reality, but it's not real reality. So virtual device is a device that normally it's dedicated. Normally it can only be used by one user, but we make it appear like it can be shared. How does that happen? This is spooling. We've already talked about it. Spooling, many devices can send jobs to the printer, but in fact, what they do not know, they cannot see, is that we have a little process here, small program, small function, that will take your stuff and say, okay, we've printed it, but it doesn't send it to the printer, it stores it in memory. For example, you have a program that wants to print 5 pages. We take it and we say, okay, next page, and we keep it in memory. And when you say, I'm finished, we tell you, it's printed. And your program finishes and goes, and does something else or disappears. But we don't delay you. You don't have to wait until it's printed. So falsely, we tell you, your stuff has been printed, when in reality it has not. So we take jobs, commands from other programs to print, and we keep them separate in memory or on the hard disk. So we store what you want to print, we store it, but we don't send it to the printer yet. The printer is free, then this process that we call the spooler will take each one of those and send them to the printer at its own time. So the printer is actually printing only one job. But 3 of them come at the same time and say, print this, and we say, okay, thank you, it's printed at the same time. They think, each one of them think they're printed. In fact, their jobs are not printed, they're still in memory. When we send one of them to the printer, when they're finished, this process will take the next one, send it to the printer, and then when it finishes, send the next one. So our process can send its job and finish and terminate, and its job hasn't even started printing. Okay, so instead of sending everything directly to the printer where you have to wait for it, you don't have to wait. We take the information from you that we want to print, we store it, and we tell you it's printed. You can go. And actually it hasn't been printed, it will be printed later. Which means these 2 or 3 jobs come in at the same time, they send their request, and they all get at the speed of light. Thank you, we got your printing done. And they go. You don't have to wait anymore. So it speeds things up. That printer that's normally very, very slow, suddenly appears it's so fast. It's as fast as memory. You can take your information, put it, and then send it to the printer later, maybe even an hour later, maybe a minute later, it doesn't matter. But at the time, we will not delay you. We'll tell you it's printed, and it will eventually be printed. So that's what spooling is. It makes a device that now is purely, and it's just dedicated device, can be used by one user. We make it appear to these guys like it's shareable. In fact, still it's not shareable. But it's a trick or a technique that makes it appear as if it is shareable. And that's called spooling. So what is required, guys, to prevent a deadlock from happening? How can we prevent a deadlock from happening in a system? Any idea? Yeah? No? How can we prevent a deadlock from happening in a system? We know what it takes a deadlock to happen. If you have 4 conditions, a deadlock will happen. How do we prevent a deadlock from happening? Remove any of those 4 conditions from a system. Make sure, for example, the first condition is mutual exclusion devices or dedicated devices. If we don't have any dedicated devices in our system, if all our devices are shareable, then we never have to wait. Anytime you want another resource to use, even if there are 3 other users using it, you go and use it as well, you'll never wait. And therefore we'll never have a deadlock. How can we, is there a way of making our devices, instead of shareable, we make them appear like they are, instead of dedicated devices, we make them appear like they are shareable? Is there a technique to do it? That's a technique, spooling. Spooling is a good example of taking a device that can never be shared, and we make it like as if it can be shared. So if you're asked, how can we get rid of this condition, mutual exclusion? How can we remove, the system, make sure devices in our system are not dedicated? One good example, spooling. It will take a printer and make it like, or a group of printers, and make them virtual devices. Change them from dedicated devices to virtual device. And a virtual device is a device that appears to be shareable. So every process thinks it can share that printer. They can use it simultaneously. It appears like they are using it simultaneously, but in fact they're not. We just take the stuff from them simultaneously, and they think we're sending it to the printer. Now we're sending it into a storage place, and then we'll print it later on their behalf. So if you're asked, how can you get rid of this condition? Dedicated devices. You say spooling is a good example, and that can turn a printer into a virtual device instead of dedicated device. How can we get, yeah?
So spooling is,
it's a method, it's a technique, it's a trick.
One of the solving methods, right?
You take, for example, normally that device connected to the printer. If it's busy, it has to wait. Are you with me? So if this device is printing, that one has to wait. But now we don't do that. If you send there's a program here that takes all the information you want to print, put it in the memory, store it in memory, or store it in a hard disk, and then tells you, yeah, your stuff is printed, thank you, go, you can go. And that's it, you go, you're finished. And then another one, maybe 2 of you at the same time, it takes from you or from the other one, put them in memory. And when the printer is finished, it will take one of yours and send it out, and then the other process and send it out for printing. They'll be printed later. They're not actually printed simultaneously. But to the process that are running, if I remember, memory operates at the speed of light, almost. The printer is so slow, slower than a hard disk, really, really slow. So it's maybe 1,000 times slower, more than 1,000 times slower than memory. So if you can send something in less than a second tells you it's printed, it's way different to having to wait for a few minutes if someone else is printing. Even if there's no one else printing, it takes so long to print a page, a few seconds. But when we use spooling, it takes all your stuff in memory immediately, in less than a second tell you we got it printed, so we can get moving, so you don't get delayed. This way, there's no delay. And the printer appears to be so fast, and it appears to be shareable, when it's not really shareable and it's not fast. But we keep the stuff you want to print, and we'll do it later. All right. What happens if we want to get rid of the other condition, the circular weight? How can we get rid of the circular weight? Any method that you know that we can get rid of the circular weight? We don't want, remember how deadlock happens. If you are asked how does a deadlock happen, you can give an example of this example. These two users, they need two resources. These two users need two resources. If one of them takes this resource to fry an egg, and this one takes this resource, and then this guy says, okay, I'll wait on the frying pan, and this one says, I'll wait on the spatula, they both will be waiting. None of them will fry an egg, and they'll both have a deadlock. They'll die of starvation. Because in this system, there's no, this hold and wait. This guy is allowed to hold the spatula. This one is allowed to hold the frying pan while waiting on the spatula. They don't release. There is no preemption. It's non-preemption. That means we cannot take away the pan, or we cannot take away the spatula to give it to the other one. All the conditions for deadlock are in this system. And these tools are not shareable. They are mutually exclusive. So that's how deadlock happens. Now, and there is eventually, the last condition is circular weight. This guy has this, or has this, and is pointing at this, I want that. Oh no, the other way around. So this guy has the spatula and wants the frying pan. This one has the frying pan and needs the spatula, so there's a circular weight. They're waiting one another, that's a deadlock. So how can we stop a circular weight? Yeah? What do you mean, allow only one user? No, the system is there. You don't know which user wants what eventually. So, you know, they might arrive. They both want two tools. You can't say, no, you can only fry an egg with one of those tools. No, they both need two or three or whatever. Like a program comes in, needs to print a list of students. It has to open the file and send it to the printer. So it needs the file and the printer. If another program needs the file and the printer, they're both stuck. One gets the file, one gets the printer. Yeah? Okay. Yeah, that will prevent the race problem. But the circular weight, to prevent it, yeah?
The semaphore, like the red or green light, the semaphore.
Say again?
Semaphore? Like the red or green light, the indicators.
Yeah, well, no, okay. Let me get rid of this first before it gets any further. We'll talk about semaphores in a few minutes, hopefully, if we have the time. Now, there's an easier way to do it here. And the easy way is to look at all your tools, all the resources, and put them in a list, in any order you like. Just have an ordered list. Don't talk to him, he's really distracting you. All right, so have the list of all the tools and give them a protocol. You say, guys, if you need more than one tool, you need 2 or 3 or 4 tools. Don't just go randomly and get anyone you find. Go in an order. Get the one at the top of the list, based on this list. For example, you need the fork and the spatula, go for the fork first. Don't even go near the spatula until you secure the fork. If you need 3 of them, for example, you need a pan, a spatula, and a liquidator. Don't go near the liquidator, even if it's beside you. Go for the pan first. When you get it, go for the spatula, then you go. So there is an order in which you take your resources. Now, if we have that system now implemented here, if you have that system implemented here, then those two, when they come up, they both want those two tools, that's the frying pan and the spatula, they both must first aim for the pan. Whoever gets the frying pan first. So they both go get it. If this guy gets it first, then this one will try to get it, find it, it's not available, go sleep. But this guy now can go and get the next tool.
But if the user opens and find it, like the list of the students, the process doesn't know if it also needs a printer, right?
They have to be in, they have to go for them in this order. And if they go for them in this order, we'll never have a deadlock. We'll never have a circular wait. This technique is so simple and it's easy to implement, and yet it provides us with no deadlock, no circular wait.
Does it have a specific name? Like,
Does it have specific time? There's no time. We don't.
no, I mean specific name. Like
It's ordered list of resources. Okay, there's no name like spooler or anything, but ordering the list of all the resources, and the users must follow this list. If they need more than one resource, they must get them in the order based on their order in the list, based on their location. So, especially if two of them need two resources, very clear. They both, these two here, they must get the pan first. None of them can go for the spatula. That makes them all go for the same resource. Whoever gets it first, the other one has to wait. Whoever has it can go easily and take the spatula at their own time. Yeah?
So we don't have the case that the user don't know all the items that he used at the beginning of the process.
Okay. Well, in this case, yeah, they need to know what their tools, all the resources they require. If they have all the resources, if they know, well, then they need to order them in that order. Okay, that's just, it's not always possible to remove the conditions. Like now we know how to remove the mutual exclusion, the dedicated device. How can we get rid of the dedicated devices in our system? Can you think of a way that we can get rid of the dedicated devices? Anybody? Spooling. So spooling is a good example to make the printer, the dedicated printer, we turn it into a shareable printer. But we don't really turn it into a shareable, we turn it into a virtual device. And what does virtual device mean? It means the device is still dedicated, but we use it as if it's a shareable device. And how do we get rid of the condition circular wait? By having all our resources put in a list and tell all the users when you need them, order them or take them, reach for them based on their location in the list, based on this order of the list. What about hold and wait? What's the other one? Hold and wait and non-preemption. How do we get rid of non-preemption? See, guys, our system is not non-preemption. We can take the resource from you. Or our system, you cannot hold a resource and go to sleep while waiting on another resource. You hold this resource. How do we get rid of that? And the simple technique is, we say at the start of your execution, tell us all the resources you need. We don't let you start running until we have all the resources that you need. Why? Because if you have everything you need, you'll never have to wait for another one. For example, if you need 3 resources and they're not available, you say, wait. Now the 3 of them are available, there you are. Then you never have to wait. Anytime you want to print, you print. Anytime you want to read, you have all the resources. You'll never have to wait for anyone, and you will finish sooner or later. And therefore, you never have to go into waiting state while holding another resource. So that's another. So these are 3 techniques, at least simple techniques. If we can implement them in our system, we can get rid of those conditions. So being able to answer that question, that means you understand how deadlock works, if you can remove a deadlock, one of the conditions. So make sure you know how to remove these conditions from a system, or how they can be removed. Sometimes they cannot be removed. We have all our devices are dedicated, and that's it. You cannot make them all virtual devices. So you have to live with that, and then we might have to start, instead of preventing, so to prevent a deadlock, remove one of those conditions, and we have examples of how to remove them. But sometimes you cannot remove them. That means we cannot prevent a deadlock. So what's the next best thing is to avoid a deadlock. And we looked at how to avoid a deadlock. Anybody knows how deadlocks are avoided? By using, yeah? Is your hand going up, the two of you? How can we how can we avoid deadlocks? I can't hear you. Avoid them. How can we avoid deadlocks? Anybody knows how to avoid deadlocks? Okay, anybody knows how to eliminate deadlocks, prevent deadlocks? Okay, one of the four conditions, remove one of the four conditions, either one of them. If we can remove one of the four conditions, we'll never have a deadlock. But if we cannot remove them, then the best thing is keep working. We know possibly maybe deadlock will happen, but we can avoid it. Each time it's about to happen, we skip it, or we avoid it somehow. Anybody knows what technique is used? It's called Banker's algorithm. We've looked at Banker's algorithm last week. No? Okay. Banker's algorithm is a technique that was used. This guy, this computer scientist, looked at banks, and they said, banks are given so many loans and things seem to be working perfect. How do they do it? And he went to a banker, somebody who works in the bank, and asked him, how do you actually give loans to hundreds of people? People pay him back and you keep giving loans, and they're making money on top of that. So how do you do it? So this is the way they do it. They say we always have limited amount of money in a bank. Maybe I'll do it on the document reader. I have a piece of paper and a pen.
So there's 7 minutes left for that.
Okay, let me do the attendance first. So I'm going to stop recording. I hope we've been recording, or have we?